That's more than I got.
You did 2 shows today.
That's true. How do you know that?
I came in when when the last show was still on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Is that a terrible secret I shouldn't have divulged?
No, not at all.
They know about tape out there in television land.
I think by this time most people know.
I barely caught on to the idea myself. I still think everything is live. I wish it were.
Do you? Do you miss the...
Don't you?
Yeah, although I don't know if the audience is that aware. I mean, when you're sitting and watching the thing,
but when you bleep or bloop or whatever it is, every third word out of some of your guests, the audience must know something is happening. No censor could be that agile.
No, there is a thing, you know, that they use though on live television where they use like a 6-second tape delay or something, so that although it's live, it's a little bit on tape, and then they can push a button, and if you say...
It's like being a little pregnant, isn't it? How can you be a little bit on tape?
It's less serious. No, it's actually running through a tape machine, and if you were to say a dirty word now, I would have... well, don't try it, but I would have a chance to push the button knowing that the sound would be erased a little ahead and then play.
Where is that button?
That's
I see. This is the special. This is the special thing.
Yeah, they have done some shows like that.
Is that the principle of what happens when they run back certain plays in a game and show it to you?
Instant replay.
Instant replay?
I don't know.
Are we way out of our depth, both of us?
Your question...
Better get on to something else.
Your questions are good. The fact that I don't have the answers is the hard part. I like something you said one time, a lot of things you said, but I remember I found a quote in which you had said, I like people to talk to me, but I hate it when they talk to Orson Welles. And I know what you mean by that. Because
sure.
People, I think I do anyway.
Sure, because they put, I don't mean just me, I'm sure you know what it is. If they talk to Dick Cavett, they put on that funny hat that goes with talking to Dick Cavett, and they aren't themselves.
Yeah.
You know, just because they've seen you on a screen, large or little, you have a kind of identity for them that makes them come on a little differently than themselves, and is kind of a drag.
Could you go easy on the large or little part?
I didn't mean that. I was talking about screen.
Oh, on the size of the screen, yes.
Yes, and I don't like talk about wide screens myself. I think we can leave this whole territory undeveloped.
Yeah. Yes. I don't think what people look like has anything to do with what they are. Listen, I want to ask you about that piece of film that we saw. I know that you hate to have your films excerpted.
I was coyly turning my face to the wall all during it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I don't know why. Is it because it can't possibly tell any of the story and it just out of context it's a little...
No, it's because I can't possibly fix it. And I always see things wrong with it, and I'd rather look back on these films as being much better than they were.
That scene, for example, then, would you change anything about that now?
Well, I know what I'd change from listening to it, which is the awful soundtrack.
That may have been our projector.
No, it wasn't. It's Harry Cohn. Yeah? Because what happened was that after the my version of it, which got its one preview, Harry decided to fix the music, and he got a theme song, which we then had Rita sing. This was in the early days of theme songs. It's when people sang them on screen instead of having combinations dinted into your ears all through the story. Every once in a while somebody came on and said, well, since I'm waiting for the leading man, I think I'll sing a song. And they, and they sang a song. So we put that in, Please Don't Kiss Me or Love Me or something or other.
Yeah.
Not a bad song, really. And Peggy Lee was quite good in it, off scene, because she was Rita's voice for that. Although Rita sang quite a lot of her own songs in her own musicals, but at Harry Cohn's whim, Peggy Lee or somebody like that would be brought in to sing part of it. I never understood that any more than I understand instant replay. Mm-hmm. But the point that I'm laboring towards is that Harry Cohn decided that the theme song would be nice in a sort of symphonic version under the shootout in the mirror scene. So instead of just hearing the crash of glass echoing and nothing else except ricocheting bullets and glass, you have all through it, which kind of louses up the proceedings.
But it made him happy.
Yes, it made him happy.
Gee, he is one of the most interesting characters in filmdom because no one ever apologizes for saying a rotten thing about a man who is dead because they always refer to him as the unlamented Harry Cohn.
Well, I lament him.
Do you?
Yeah. I liked him. I really did because he was a monster.
Yeah.
But they all were, or almost all of them, those guys who ran their own stores in those old days of Hollywood. But he came on as a monster, and he could never be as bad as his first impression. So everything was a pleasant surprise after that. You know, he snarled at you as you came in the door, you know, "Rah," like that. Yeah. And you could gradually throw him little goodies, and he would quiet down and start lashing his tail. And I did get to be quite fond of him, in spite of the fact that he bugged my office. He really did. I think he bugged everybody's office, but one day I found a microphone behind a picture and discovered that this led up to Harry Cohn's own office so he could tune in. So those days I had a radio show, and I'd begin every day at the office. I'd say, well, good morning, everybody. This is Mercury Productions beginning another day's work. We hope you'll enjoy it. We'd play the theme and then go on in the office for his benefit. And then at the end of the day, I'd say, well, that winds up another day at the Mercury. Tune in tomorrow. But he was all right, you know. He was all right because he had tremendous courage.
How so?
Well, if he believed in something, he would go the distance, what gamblers describe as going the distance, which is a great quality in a showman. Yeah. And I was eternally grateful to him for what he did for me because I had a musical only a few doors away from here, Around the World in 80 Days. And I had to open in Boston. I had a lot of costumes waiting. Did I tell you this story?
No.
I had a lot of costumes waiting in the railway station, which couldn't go from the railway station to the theater, about 8 blocks away. This was in Boston where we were opening, unless somebody paid Brooks Costume Company $47,000. And we didn't have $47,000 because originally we had a producer called Mike Todd who had gone broke. And I had done that terrible scene in movies where he said, come on, kids, you know, George Murphy used to always do that, and Gene Kelly, people like that say, come on, kids, we'll get the show on anyway. You know, that terrible thing. Yeah. And I did that. I heard myself speaking these terrible, corny lines, and there I was stuck with $350,000 worth of show that I had to get on somehow. And a lot of things happened trying to get it on. Can I tell one story parenthetically before getting to that?
Sure.
The man who wrote the music was Cole Porter. And everybody said, don't have Cole Porter because he's written out, you see. And in fact, he'd written a couple of not very successful shows just before that. And I said, nobody with all that genius could possibly be written out. And I did the show with him, and he wrote a complete score, not one note of which was ever heard on radio or indeed on the lips of anybody wishing to whistle their way up the aisle out of the theater. And the next show he wrote was Kiss Me, Kate. So you see, I'd had a little bit of bad luck. And stuck in Boston with a musical without a single song and needing $47,000 before curtain time, I found myself in the box office trying to think of who could send me this money. And I thought Harry Cohn, who I hardly knew. And I called him up on the long-distance phone. I said, Harry Cohn, this is Orson Welles. I've just read a book, and I turned a paperback around, which the girl had in front of her was selling tickets, and I said, it's called something or other. It wasn't a lady from Shanghai then, just this. Yeah. Buy it, and I will make it for you if you'll send me $47,000 in 2 hours. And he did.
Gee.
And that's how the picture was made.
If no book had been lying there, it would have been no.
So he's lamented as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Gee, that's good. Are you ever going to write, may I call you Orson again?
Oh, my goodness. Wouldn't it be ridiculous if you didn't?
All right. Are you ever going to do a biography of yourself?
Well, I don't think a biography, because nowadays there's if you buy somebody's life story, they expect an awful lot of the sort of material that I don't tell anybody, you know, much less whoever would have the price of a book. I think one's privacy is invaded enough without doing it to oneself. But I would like sometime to write a book of with memoir is an awful pompous word, but on subjects that interest me and about people I've known and liked rather than, and disasters and pleasures that I've had and all that, but not a 1, 2, 3 ABC, you know, one sunny morning in Kenosha, a chubby little one, you know.
I do know.
You know, that kind of thing.
You know, your childhood, though, does interest me. I really envy it. The idea, I never got to Europe until my present age, and a lot of people don't ever get there. And the thought of a child being taken there over and over as a kid, when was the earliest you went?
Well, I've spent my whole life kind of gypsying around. My father lived in Peking for quite a long time, and I spent 5 or 6 years there, or the greater part of those years. He stayed in Peking just because the living was easy there. You know, he liked to live au prince, in a very grand way, and he was born with a lot of bread and cast it on the waters, and it failed to return. And the only way he could really live it up was in Peking, where you could have 400 servants and give dinner parties with gold plate and have columns of ice with trees of orchids frozen into them for a mere pittance, relatively speaking. And that's what brought us to Peking. And I was sent to Europe at a very early age on trips, first with other little boys and then by myself, totally without any guidance. The idea was you've got to learn to be on your own. That had happened to my father when he was about 10.
How little,
and he
then?
did it to me. At 10 was the first time I actually traveled alone in Europe with just so much money tied into my jeans, and there I went, you know.
Did that seem romantic and exciting?
Terribly romantic.
Yeah.
Terribly romantic. What seemed even more romantic to me were all the expensive hotels and restaurants I couldn't afford to get into on the amount of money they thought I should learn to get along on.
Can you
That
remember?
didn't seem a bit picturesque.
guess
Sure you
not.
know.
Can you remember meeting people then that you realized later the significance of, if you know what I mean? I mean,
No, because
did
I
you
think
meet
I
them?
realized then.
You did.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
told me, and I was very impressed by great people and interesting people as a kid. I was very interested in older people, unlike most young people are indeed.
That is odd for a
Yes.
kid. You didn't have little friends that you played with. In
I
the sense that
I had little friends who if they were big enough, chased me around the block, and little friends who, if they were meek enough, I bullied. But it was always pretty much of a battle in the contemporary scene. And I was always scared of teenagers.
Why?
I hated them before I was in my teens. I thought they were insane.
Yeah.
And after I spent all my teens pretending not to be in my teens, but in my 20s, and avoiding that age. And it's only recently, since the teenagers have become the rulers and sovereigns of the world, that I've changed my opinion. But until this very latest generation, I have been very strongly of the conviction that there are periods during one's adolescence when one is feverishly insane.
Well said.
That's been changed, however, now.
You have certain sympathy now with that age.
More than sympathy. I'm
Yeah.
grateful to them even for their fever.
Talking with Orson Welles, I guess I just can't get over that childhood of yours. The little scraps I've read about it, sitting at tables at your age with people who were, well, in other countries for one thing, but sometimes world leaders, I suppose. Or were there any world leaders?
Oh yes, the world leader that really came to nothing, as far as my memory is concerned, was Hitler. I was being escorted. I went twice through the Tyrol and Austrian German hiking country. Once with one teacher and once with another. And one of the two teachers was, it turned out, a sort of a budding Nazi. And there was a big Nazi rally near Innsbruck. In the days when the Nazis were just a very comical kind of minority party of nuts that nobody took seriously at all, except my hiking companion, this gentleman and his knapsack, and he wangled a place at the table with the great men of this tiny little party of cranks. And I remember very well afterwards, Stryker, who was the leader of the big anti-Semitic campaigns, and 2 or 3 other well-known people to this day. The man sitting next to me was Hitler, and he made so little impression on me that I can't remember a second of it.
Gee.
He had no personality whatsoever.
Wonder if
He was invisible.
Wonder if under hypnosis it would come out. Do you?
No, I think there was nothing there that anybody'd remember. Till you had 5,000 people yelling, "Sieg Heil," Heil Hitler. That's the whole point of the story, that there wasn't anything to remember.
What about those films that were made about him by Leni Riefenstahl?
Pretty good films.
Are they? You often hear that
They are awfully well made, yes.
Is she alive?
Yes.
Have you met her?
No, I haven't met her, but she's living, I think, in England or some place like that, and hustling around trying to get, to flog a documentary here and there on almost any subject.
Gee, interesting thing.
I never met Stalin. I never met Stalin, but Roosevelt I knew very well, and Churchill, and lots of, during childhood and then youth, of course. I was very lucky in that respect.
What age were you when you were orphaned?
Well, my mother died when I was 7, and my father died when I was 15, beginning of my 15th birthday. Then I ran away, tried to stay out of school, out of Harvard. I had a scholarship, and desperate not to be educated, I went into the theater. I made it. I wasn't educated.
What if you were now? I mean, what if you wanted to go to school? Do you have any idea what you want to study now?
Gee, that's a good question. Everything, I guess. But if I wanted to study seriously, and get good at a subject, I think it would be anthropology. Don't you think that's a fascinating subject?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I would too. I don't know. Or maybe philosophy. I never thought about it very much.
I'm suspicious of philosophy. I have a real Philistine doubt about its worth, but anthropology seems to me to be just at its beginnings.
Who else stands out from that time in your life? What faces come to mind?
Well, you mean famous ones?
Sure, or infamous,
yes,
or not famous, or any of that.
Well, we had Schicklgruber, but you know wonderful people that aren't famous. I guess one of the most remarkable people I ever knew was somebody called Cornelia Lunt, and Alfred Lunt used to pretend to be her cousin. They weren't related at all. They loved each other, and she was, when I knew her, in her middle 90s, and had been a hostess of great importance, although very young, in the Civil War in America, and knew intimately all the great names of the Civil War. I could tell you all about what Lincoln said and what my great-grandfather Gideon Welles said, who was Secretary of Navy in the Cabinet. And she great kind of raconteur on the Civil War. And then she went over to London, where she was at the American Embassy, and where she knew everybody in England. All those fabulous people that seemed to have been dead for 200 years, in the Victorian age. Yeah. And you could only get her to tell about these things with great difficulty. She didn't go on and on like I do. You had to drag it out of her, and she was delicious. She was an old lady who, when she gave a big party, sat on a little stool, and she gave you a big chair. If you can imagine an old lady like that. She was very beautiful. Must have been not so beautiful when she was young, but one of those people that old age glorifies. And she had a little bell. And when she wanted everybody to be quiet so she could say something, she'd ring her bell. And then we'd all be quiet, and she'd make her little statement, then ring it again, and everybody could talk again. And she's one of the great people I've known, as great, certainly, as Churchill or Roosevelt or George Marshall, and I suppose Marshall is the greatest man I ever met.
Really?
Yes, I would think so.
What would you admire about him above everybody else?
Human being. I think he's the greatest human being who was also a great man, whom I was ever privileged to meet.
Have you known some that were...
Can I tell a little story about him?
Certainly.
We'd been campaigning for Roosevelt, not George Marshall, but some of the rest of us, and one of our rewards when he got in again, one of those many times that he did, was to go to a big party of very big brass and sit on the dais and be treated as though we were part of the high command just for one night. And there were all these tremendous names from the Second World War. 2 or 3 civilians. Truman, the vice president, who was playing the piano. We were rather embarrassed about that because he didn't seem to be awfully good on the piano. And we didn't know that he was going to be a great president, you see.
I see.
And it didn't look as though he did either, as a matter of fact. But he and myself, there were only about 4 or 5 civilians. All the rest were tremendous brass, dripping with gold, braid and medals and everything else. And it was in the Mayflower Hotel in Washington. And a door opened. And GI, more innocent looking than anything you could possibly imagine and younger than anything you could dream of, stuck his head in. At the moment when General Marshall happened to look toward the door, and the boy looked at him, he said, "Gee, General Marshall, can I come in and say hello to you?" Marshall said, "Yeah, come in." And Marshall didn't know anybody was watching. This wasn't a grandstand play. I was in a position, my camera was angled, so he didn't know he was getting photographed in anybody's film of memory.
Yeah.
And he took the boy aside, away from everybody, and sat down with him. And I heard as he went that the boy had been away from home. And the boy recognized Marshall as somebody like a family. Now, this was the commander of all the Allied forces. And he sat with this boy without any grandstanding at all, and just put him at ease and made him feel at home again for half an hour and left all the rest of us. He was that kind of fellow.
I wonder what the difference is between a man like that and the ones who are impressive publicly but couldn't be bothered to talk to anyone that isn't important to them or flattering.
Well, I don't know. Those kind of people are all second-rate, who can't be bothered at all, ever.
Yeah.
But there are those who can't be bothered sometimes. You know, and that's... You had a feeling with Marshall that if it were possible to be bothered, he would let himself be bothered. He was a tremendous gentleman, you know, an old-fashioned institution which isn't with us anymore.
You almost never want to ask anyone the question who's impressed you the most, and it's wonderful to have a guest who can give you the answer.
Well, I never do know the
like
answers to those kind of
They're
questions,
hard, aren't they?
you know, but I just
Yeah.
happened to know that one.
Yeah.
Of course, I was immensely impressed with Churchill, but he was quite another thing, you know. He had great humor and great irony. He went to see me when I played Othello on the stage in London, and I heard a low murmuring in the front row. I thought he was talking to himself, and then he came backstage afterwards and sat down in the dressing room and said, "Most potent, grave, and reverend signors, my most approved good masters," and began the whole of Othello's part, which he had memorized, and including the cuts which I had made, which he read with a good deal of extra emphasis. And then a few years afterwards, I happened to be in Venice trying to get some money for a movie during the festival, and poor Churchill had been, right after the war, as you know, crest of the greatest victory that any single man had ever presided over in modern history, was voted out of office. Quite properly, probably, but it was a tragic blow for him. And there he was in the hotel at the Lido with Clemmy, his wife, alone. And he'd go swimming out on the beach. And one day at lunch, I came in with a Russian businessman I was trying to hustle for some money for this picture. And as we passed Mr. Churchill's table, Mr. Churchill saw me and made that little gesture, and the Russian went out of his mind. This is a white Russian, not a red Russian. This is a you know, a hustling, semi-Armenian Russian. And when he saw that Mr. Churchill not only knew me, but gave a rather special acknowledgement, it was clear to me that I had the money for my picture. So the next morning I was out swimming in the beach, and I found myself paddling in the water right next to Mr. Churchill. And I hadn't gone up to speak to him, but there we were in the water, and I had known him on and off during the war in a humble capacity, and I said, and he had come backstage to see me, and I said, Mr. Churchill, I think you ought to know what you did for me. And I told him about how this acknowledgement had meant so much to me with my financier. And that day at lunch, I came in with a financier again, and Mr. Churchill rose from his chair and bowed.
You've lived all over the place, all over the globe, and then for a long time when you were not in this country, then you suddenly came back. Oh, what opinion do you have of some of the generalizations that are made about the country, that there's something violent in the American character, for example, or that
there is.
Or that the country's...
I think there is, don't you?
I
think there always has been, though.
Yeah.
I think it's part of our whole story.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that is generally true, the one generalization which is true about America, is that everything is true about it. Yeah. It's impossible to say anything that isn't true, good or bad. Our enemies are right, our friends are right.
Yeah.
It's an awful big country, an awful lot of different kinds of people in it, and violence always has been part of our story. It is, I've seen it in my own lifetime long before this period, and we certainly read about it in history. Yeah. That's the way we won the country and stole it away from the Indians and all the rest of it.
Is it? I wonder why it should be, though. There's any reason why the English, if they had had Indians in England before they were Englishmen there,
well,
that they
would
would
had
have
some
been
Indians in India.
Yes, they did, didn't they? Yeah.
And they had those kind of folks all over, and they, in some places, they brought the law and justice. And I've talked to people in other ex-colonies, nice people. When you mention the British, burst into tears of anger, literally tears of rage, about our nice English cousins. So the bad things are true about them. They burnt the roofs off of the Irish and starved them out into the cold. There's nothing that you can think of that the English didn't do to that island right next door to them, to the Irish, over a period of 700 years. And we're English. And then we added a lot of other violent mixtures to the brew. I think man is a crazy animal.
Yeah.
I think we're also marvelous people, divine in our potentialities. You see, there you are. You can say anything with passion and get a hand. But seriously, I think everything is true about people, just as it's true about America. We can do anything vile and anything great. And all the generalizations are true, and all of them are boring, as you must certainly have noted in the line of your work. Could I ask you about your work? Could I interview you?
I know that probably...
Is that a good idea?
I suppose... Well, I'll tell you.
Is it impertinent?
Well, let me tell you, it's frightening to meet a legend, and I know that it must be upsetting for you, too. And I know that half your life has been spent wanting to know about me, so shoot.
Well, it seems like that's true, because I've been watching you an awful long time.
Well,
and with great pleasure.
That's great.
As millions of other people have been doing. I think that deserves a little applause.
Oh, no.
I'm just trying to work them up. But really, I would like to know more about you. And I bet there are millions of people who don't know much about you, except as you appear in the course of your conversation. In other words, the other night on the show, or not the other night, some weeks ago, I heard you say, to my distress, that you had once been an actor.
Ah, yes.
Now, I'm always sorry to hear anybody that I admire has been an actor.
There are those who were more immediately distressed than you were hearing it that night. Yes, I was one of the, I guess, in the annals of the theater, I guess probably one of the top 3 second murderers in Richard III.
But was that your only role?
Yes, and unfortunately, it wasn't even in the play Richard III. I was in a repertory thing. This actually happened to me one night. I committed the awful sin of being in repertory and coming out and doing a line from the wrong play. Not just one line, but it certainly...
If you've done that, you're a veteran, because we've all done that.
Have you done that?
Oh, my goodness.
Have you?
Oh, my goodness, yes. We even did a gag of it. By the way, you said something wrong when you introduced me. You said, and this is a parenthesis, that I'd produced 3 plays in my repertory company and then went to Hollywood, and in fact, we did dozens and dozens of shows. At one time, we had a repertory in which we were, our proposition, our idea was to do a tragedy, which was Danton's death, and another night, a farce by La Biche. And we had a famous actor from Middle Europe playing in the tragedy, and he didn't have any part in the farce. But every night of the farce, he used to come in during the big door slamming thing, dressed up as Robespierre, look around and say, "Oh, mistake," and run out again. In the wrong play, you see. But showed the right spirit. But of course, but we've all, you know, in Shakespeare, you're going to the wrong lines all the time. Because of the rhythm.
Sure.
If you stop thinking for a minute, you're in another play.
I saw another actor do it one time. This was at Stratford, Connecticut, but he came on and he started The Merchant of Venice right in the middle of the council scene in Othello. And it's pretty hard when the Council of Cyprus breaks up laughing and giggling in the serious scene. It's very, very
Now, you
distracting
began
to the
as an
movie.
actor? Excuse me if I press on with this.
That's all right. You won't learn anything.
When did you go straight?
While you were asking that question, I think. That startled me. No, I'm kind of a male garbo, Mr. Wells. I like to preserve a great deal of mystery about myself and my
so ends the
origins.
interview?
And that's it. Yep. Oh, my name's up on the screen. See, there's so many things
Excuse me, I don't think we should let you weasel out of this quite so easily.
But I'm thinking of the... please.
You know, you sit there night after night for 90 minutes at a time, drunk with power,
Yes,
pelting people with questions and a few simple little requests for information. And what do we get? You know, the second murderer.
that's right.
Right? Now, what did you do after leaving the boards?
After leaving the boards, well, then I was a comedy writer for a while. I wrote for
That I knew.
Jack Parr and others.
Now, that brings me to a question. You mentioned Jack Parr, and then you say, and others.
Yes, I do.
Who are the others?
I'm learning how to do this. This is very good. Does Jerry Lewis ring a bell?
A rather dim gong. I'm getting to sound like Noel.
Yes, you are.
Sort of fat Noel.
Noel Coward.
Not as funny, but the same delivery. No, no, really. I'd like to press on with an embarrassing question.
Really?
You know, among tenors, for example,
Yes.
among newscasters, among Shakespearean actors, even among politicians, there's very little reluctance to discuss the competition. But why among you fellows who sit saying, "Will you welcome, please, a sweet singer of songs," and when did you stop beating your
Yeah.
wife, and all the rest of it?
Yeah.
Why do you fellows shrivel up? Your heads get like little walnuts when anybody ever mentions, for example, Johnny Carson or Merv Griffin or David Frost. What is this reluctance to mention even the names?
All right, that's a good question.
What will we do? You know, you're all like that. It isn't just you. There must be a professional reason.
And not express even an opinion on them.
Yes,
is
it's
quite
sort of a
common, too.
terrible
I think
clamming up.
it's because you are in competition with them in a sense. Although those guys are both friends of mine that you mentioned. I've worked for them and all, and you feel kind of funny talking about somebody who's doing sort of the same thing you do. And I think that's why none of us ever mention the other jerks, the other fellas who do. Oh, you've trapped me, Mr. Wells. I know, it's interesting.
I don't feel that I have somehow.
No.
You're a sly one.
You've stripped
Cavett.
me bare.
Yeah, all right. I see I'm getting nowhere with that line of
Well, you know what?
questioning.
It makes me uncomfortable because I feel that I'm here every night. And
So are they.
And you're not. You see.
Oh, I see. So you don't want me to go on with this?
Well, you
And will
can.
you remain this mystery forever?
Yeah, I feel like I'm a thinly wrapped enigma. There may not be that much there to know. But while you're here, I feel obligated to all those people, particularly the film buffs, who expect me to ask you certain questions, but then you're probably tired of a lot of those.
I never answer them.
Yeah.
I never answer them, not because of general snottiness. It's just that I don't know the answers to most of the questions. You mentioned Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
And I caught him on one of your friend's shows. I guess we call him your friend.
Yes.
We don't mention that. I caught them on one of your friend's shows. In fact, he was on interminably on one of your friend's shows.
Yeah.
And I feel that what he did for Myra Breckinridge, I ought to do for Jerry Lewis. Because he really has a way of coming on as a great thinker, which should be stopped. Why I mention him, though, and I'm not going to mention him much longer, because I would hate to do for him what he did for Myra Breckinridge. Why I mention it is because he said the sort of thing that you hear from film buffs, and you don't expect to hear from Jerry Lewis. He actually said on The Tonight Show,
Yeah.
well, the secret of authenticity and complete autocracy and autonomy is autonomy and cinematic integrity. Or words to that effect. Now, those are the kind of questions that the film buffs like to ask, and that I guess Jerry Lewis answers because he teaches how to make movies in a school, among other things, I believe. That was a thought he dropped several times. And my bitterness about him stems from the fact that here's a rich fellow who has plenty other things to do except come on with that kind of dialogue. There's really too much of it.
There's
too many long words. You know there are too many long words in the world nowadays, and that the younger the people are, the longer the words are. Have you noticed that? It's a very funny thing. They have a wonderful new hip language, which is really our old Harlem language that I used to know when I was running a theater up there, with a few new phrases, and they're great and very colorful. Mm-hmm. But everything else is terribly long. Nobody says, I see a thing a certain way. They say, I envisage it. Nobody says, under 30, I would like to think up an idea. They say, I have conceived something, or this is my conception, or not, this is my relationship. Everything is 4 or 5 syllables long.
That's
Have you
right.
noticed that?
There's a veracity in what you're saying. Do you have any recurrent dreams?
I think we'll take a break.
I asked you to read something for us, and I know that's hard
This is a cue,
to
in
turn
other words.
in, but would you
Yeah,
do
you
a
really
little
did.
something and just...
I thought for a while that maybe there'd been enough Shakespeare inflicted on talk shows. Oh. And every once in a while, when I'm doing a movie, I play a part where the director says, would you write yourself a speech? That's happened a few times. And they played, I think, the Third Man theme not long ago. In that picture, I wrote that part, for instance. Just that part, not the movie. Yeah. And I've been making a picture. I can't give the name of it, not because it's a secret, but because they change the title every day. And I've been making it with Tuesday Weld. And it's happens out in Central Park, and I think it's going to be quite an exciting event. And I play an old Jewish professional chess player. Well, I don't know why he's a professional chess player or why the young girl, who is also a very little girl, it's a fantasy, gets to be a friend of his, because they wouldn't let me read the rest of the script. I don't quite know why, but part of their diabolic plan was for me to write my stuff, and there has to be a Noah's Ark toy brought up during the course. This sounds really crazy, and I'm losing you, but I've got to say all this so you know how it happens. And they said, well, write a thing about Noah's Ark, and this is what I did. And it's about the Noah's Ark story. And it's partly what the old man says himself and partly from the Bible as he quotes from it. And I hope that none of our listeners of any faith will be offended at the reminder that the story of the flood is, after all, a Jewish story. God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great, and the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, for it repenteth me that I have made them. Behold, I shall bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, and every living thing shall die. But then, after he'd fixed it for a big flood to wash everything away, he began to feel a little sorry. It says so right there in the Bible. God changed his mind. He remembered somebody that he loved. He remembered Noah. Who was Noah? All we know from the Bible is that he was very old and liked to get very drunk. But Noah, it says here, found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence. And behold, I will bring a flood upon the earth to destroy all flesh, and every living thing shall die. Except you, Noah. And your wife, Mrs. Noah. And your sons. And their wives. And of course, so you won't starve when the flood's over, we'll have to save the birds and the animals too. So hurry up, for God's sake, and build a boat. A big one. And put into it every living thing of all flesh. 2 of every sort, male and female, to keep them alive with you. And old Noah did as God told him. He built the boat, the ark, and all the fountains of the great deep were all broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. And Noah went in with his family into the ark, and the beasts of the earth, and the birds of the sky, and every living thing that creepeth upon the earth went in 2 by 2 unto Noah into the ark, male and female, as God had commanded. And that way, after all, everything was saved. 40 days and 40 nights the rain was upon the face of the earth, and the waters increased greatly upon the earth. And the ark was lifted up and went upon the face of the waters, and the waters prevailed. And all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, and all that was in the dry land died, men and cattle and creeping things and the birds of the heaven. They were all destroyed. Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. The waters prevailed upon the face of the earth 150 days. Then God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters were assuaged. The windows of heaven were stopped, and the waters returned from off the earth continually. And Noah opened the window of the ark, and he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. And she returned to the ark, and Noah put forth his hand and took her and pulled her in unto him into the ark. And 7 days later, he sent forth the dove again out of the ark. And in the evening, the dove came back to him, and lo, in her mouth was an olive branch plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And in another 7 days, he sent forth the dove, and she returned not again to him any more. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And God spoke to Noah and said, go on, ashore. It's all over. Take Mrs. Noah and your sons and their wives, and take with you all the living things that you've saved from the flood, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth. Into your hands they are delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. But at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. And the Lord said, in his own heart, he said, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite every living thing, as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So everybody went ashore and started to do their thing all over again. Once again, including old Cap Noah got himself stinking drunk to celebrate. It's right there in the Bible. And now that the storm was over up in the sky, there was a rainbow. And God said, look, I set my rainbow in the cloud. It shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth, that never, never shall the earth be destroyed by me. The rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I, the Lord, will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between me and every living creature. So the rainbow is God's promise, never again to destroy what he created. A contract printed up in all the colors there are. And if ever again he should feel tempted to call it a bad job and blow us all up or wash the whole world away into darkness, there in the sky will be his rainbow, like a string on God's finger, to remind him. From now on, he's left the whole thing in our hands, the earth and all that grows on it, and everything that lives on it, in our hands. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. Only we can destroy it.
That was good. I wondered, one thing I read about you that I found a little surprising was that you, check me on this, did not like solitude.
I love solitude.
Then they were wrong.
You bet. But aren't they always wrong in what they write?
I guess so. Have you been badly misquoted?
But I think everybody is, and everything. I don't think history can possibly be true. Possibly. I'll tell you why. Because we all know people who get things written about, and we know that they're lies what is written. I told a story to Buck Henry last year in Wymus, and he told the story that he thought I had told him to a newspaper that I read the other day, and it bears not the slightest resemblance to what I said. Now that's an intelligent man, a year later, meaning me well, and that's the, the gospel according to Buck Henry, and it's totally apocryphal. Imagine what nonsense everything else is.
I know. It is. Do you want to clear it up now?
About that I don't like solitude?
No, the story.
No, it isn't worth going into all that. It isn't all that good a story.
Yeah. When you were on that film, and
He made it seem, I must say he improved it. Maybe that's what, it was just awkward.
history is an improved version of what happened.
No, not necessarily. Only if Buck Henry writes it, I guess.
I see. What about when you're on a film like that where somebody else is directing and they do tend to be in awe of you as much as you don't like people to be? And Mike Nichols was making that film. He said it would probably, he was worried about the fact that he would know that you working just as an actor were also thinking about the direction at the same time. How can you calm somebody down about that?
In his case, he was put at his ease almost immediately when he sensed, as he must have sensed, since he's an immensely intuitive man, that I enormously admired him.
And
so how could he have been anything but comfortable?
What do they mean when they say, you know, that someone said about you who'd worked with you in a film, he not only knows if he's in the shot, he knows so much about movies, he knows if he's in focus. Is this possible?
Well, I know where the camera is cutting. I know what's in the shot and what isn't from a long working acquaintanceship with lenses and the camera. You know, I'm at ease in that respect. You have to learn that if you jump back and forth. It's not all that miraculous. Sounds great, but isn't all that wonderful.
So you really can tell if you're in focus.
Yeah, and it's not that hard to do.
Yeah. Is it nitpicking or annoying when people ask specific little questions about film, like in Citizen Kane? People remember that.
It's nitpicking.
Oh. Okay.
No, sorry. That was rude. I beg your pardon.
Look.
Cheap and easy gag. Finish it.
No, I'm not going to ask it now.
So.
No. I was going to say that everybody remembers, get this in, everybody remembers that one scene where you suddenly cut to a cockatoo screeching just before.
That was to wake up the audience.
It's as simple
That's the
as
entire significance of the cockatoo.
I just can't get I can't get a pretentious answer out of you. This is an album, Orson Welles' The Begatting of the President, and it goes from FDR up to the current time, and Mr. Welles, who was very sensitive and kind, asked me not to even mention it. And
yes, I know. That's the way it goes. So, well, it's biblical.
It is biblical and humorous.
But comical in intention.
Good combination.
Yes, yes.
What does it mean that you were a brigadier general once?
Now, there's a question. Well, you want my war memories, do you?
I'd like that.
Well, I used to be drafted every month all during the war.
Oh.
And I was drafted every month and thrown out the same day because of a bad back and a lot of other things. But drafted every month because the draft board contained some Hearst people. And Hearst was after me because of Kane, and this was a good way to needle me. So right up to the end, when there were, just the bottom of the barrel was lining up, dressed like they do at the end of the first act of Hair, and waiting to shuffle off into oblivion, there I was a familiar figure, I may say, in the draft department. And during the course of the war, I was sent on several totally idiotic missions of one sort and another, in a civilian capacity. But when you are flown over or near enemy territory as a civilian, they give you sort of a semi-official title so that if you're captured, highly unlikely situation, you will be treated by the rank that your documents say you have. And several times I was a major and I made chicken colonel, and once as a joke somebody made me brigadier general, which wasn't that unusual. Sometimes kind of faintly well-known people got to be brigadier general on a piece of paper in case you were captured. Well, here I am in the draft board right near the end of the war once again. We're all lined up, and for some reason the sergeant says, all right, anybody who's ever been in the Army or have held any rank, please step forward. And about 10 of us step forward. He says, all right, anybody, what the rank, anybody above the rank of corporal? That left about 3. He says, above the rank of sergeant, and that left me. Now, you know the rest of this. I had been up for several nights, and I wasn't at my best. I didn't think. And he says, what was your rank? And I said, brigadier general. And he said, all right, down on your hands and knees and pick up all the cigarette butts, general. And I spent the rest of the day naked, picking up cigarette butts for having been a general. That's my
And
my war service.
none of that was captured on film.
Luckily, no.
Yeah.
We didn't make those kind of movies then.
I wonder, we only have 2 minutes left. Has anyone ever made a pornographic masterpiece?
I think it could only be a masterpiece of pornography, but not a masterpiece which was pornographic, if you understand what I mean. In other words, if what you're after is to excite people sexually, overexcite them or stimulate them, then it should be possible to make a film which is exciting and is therefore a masterpiece of excitation. But you cannot make a film masterpiece which is pornographic because the material is antipathetic to the film. You can get as dirty as you want, but not also excite people, because exciting people during the course of a story, exciting them sexually, is changing the subject so completely that you have no more narrative form.
Well, there goes my project.
What you'd been thinking for?
Now, someone asked about that the other day, and I was curious about it. We have a minute left. If we were loading on the Ark now, and you could grab 4 or 5 films, not your own, but other people's, to save on the Ark for posterity, what would you grab? Too tough?
Quick, another answer.
Another question?
Yeah.
Oh,
Another. You've
2
completely
films.
thrown me. Two
That is-
films.
Yeah.
2 films. 2 films. Grande Illusion of Renoir.
Yeah.
And something else.
Good, I'm sure. Well, I never told you. Right. It is, isn't it? What you said, that's a dirty trick during
Very
the-
dirty trick, yeah.
that I met you once and didn't tell, because I saw you the other night here in town, but I
I
met-
remember
but a
I was
long time-
outside the Dixie Hotel and you came by in a cab and you whistled, right?
No, that was someone else. No, but you were outside the Dixie Hotel. Is this Dixie Hotel still there? I guess it must be. No, I don't want to keep you in suspense. At some point during the evening, I will reveal it to you. Let me know when the suspense gets so unbearable.
How
that
about
you
if I
just-
scream right now?
No, I want to wait a while.
Oh.
I'll wait a while. You're not going to snatch off your hair like Carol Burnett did the other night here, are you?
Wasn't that great?
That was a great shock
Yeah.
to say to a woman, what do you do when you let your hair down? And she said this and pulled it off. She's a good friend of yours, though.
Actually, talking about the Dixie Hotel, we decided that if we ever did another special, we would do it in the lobby of the Dixie Hotel.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we thought it would be fun.
I know for people, when I was a kid, way back on the Jackie Gleason show, he always used to do a joke about memoirs of an elevator operator in the Dixie Hotel.
Oh,
It's been a
yes.
joke for years, although the hotel is all fixed up now.
Well, we could
Yeah.
try Filene's Basement or something like that.
What does that mean?
Filene's Basement? It's a bargain basement in a shop called Filene's in Boston.
Oh,
I just
know
did a
that one.
commercial, didn't I?
You may have,
Yeah.
yes. You may get a bargain in the mail. Do kids recognize you on the street as Mary Poppins?
Yes, and they sometimes expect me to do something magical, and then it's very hard.
Do you carry any tricks about with you,
No,
so
no.
you can do that?
Just a sharp cuff across the ear usually does it.
Just touch of W.C. Fields.
That's right,
I
yes.
didn't know that. That was your first film, wasn't it? Mary
Yes.
Poppins?
Yes.
Nothing else from. You'd never done any little films, or
No, I just
Yeah.
I did a commercial in England once for something or other, but nothing. No.
were you prepared for the great success of it? Were you floored
No,
by the tremendous
something
success?
nice happened. I had made Poppins and Emily and The Sound of Music, and none of them had been released. So I had all the great fun of making films and none of the responsibility of having them released.
They were all in the can,
Yeah, that's
so to
right.
speak,
Mm.
and then all came out
Yes.
at once.
Well, kind of just one after the other. Yeah.
Yeah. What is there a kind of role that you'd really like to get into, to kind of get out of the pure image you have? Do you know what I mean by the pure image?
Kind of. Yeah.
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 I mean, sweet and very nice and very proper and very lovely and.
Well, if you could think of the
and,
opposite of that, it might help, you know?
Yeah.
But
Because everyone knows that you're not really any of those things.
oh, of course.
And
Damn right, I should say. Yes.
why, Sandra? No, but would you like to do a real low-down, wretched, Tobacco Road type part?
No, not really. I wouldn't mind doing a low-down kind of hokey thing, you know, something really wacky and wild. That would be great. I'd love to do an out-and-out comedy and try that. And I'd like to do a modern film. I've never done anything that wasn't in a period costume, you know, wasn't a period film. I mean, even Emily, which sort of seems modern, was 1942 or something
What about
like that.
the Hitchcock?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Yeah, I'd forgotten. Yeah. No, you're right.
It must be nice to be able to forget an entire movie. I like that. You, now, could you clear up one thing for me, and then we'll never have to discuss
Only
it
if you'll
again.
tell me where we met.
Okay, I will, right after,
All right.
right after this.
Okay.
Why did you not make the movie of My Fair Lady? It's never been completely explained to me.
It's very simple. I had never made a movie. I was not a star. I was not box office.
But you were the star of it on Broadway.
Yeah, but
Everybody had bought the record.
But people on Broadway or around Broadway might know, but certainly people out in the middle of America and out here and didn't know me from Adam, you know.
Yeah.
And so I understand it.
But
I'll
then you
never
Rex
forget it,
Harrison,
but I
and-
understand it.
You'll never forget. You must have been really sore at the time,
Well,
because it was certainly your part.
It's nice to have the kind of compensation that I had, which was Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
And so I felt, you know, kind of.
Was that
fairly
decision made by one man or a group of people? Or?
I don't really know. I honestly, I don't know why. Maybe I was silly, but I didn't really hold out much hope for it. I mean, I didn't think that I would get it, just because I knew I'd never made a film, and how could I, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. So it wasn't that great a surprise.
No.
I'll tell you where we met.
Where?
Your dressing room.
Where? Which dressing room?
Are we on the air? I was still in college when My Fair Lady opened,
Yes.
and it opened in New Haven.
Yes.
And an opening night,
Which was a thunderstorm or a snowstorm or something.
yeah, and something went badly wrong. I remember Moss Hart came out before the curtain and said, everyone went, oh, because they'd heard all about this show.
Yes.
And he said, no, nobody's sick. It's but one of the turntables.
Both
giant
turntables. We had
Both
two
of
of them, and neither of them were going to work. And he just
right.
warned the audience. But you came back afterwards?
I was there, and there was a sense of just gigantic success about it that night. It went about an hour longer than normal because stagehands had to come on and turn the tables.
That's
and
right. They
things
had to
on.
crank them by hand,
Yeah.
and the show ran about 4 hours.
Yeah.
And it was the first time we'd ever really done it, you know, with an audience. And I remember I got my wig on backwards that night.
You did?
Yes, I had an incredibly fast change, and I just, you know, I had different hairstyles for different parts of the play, and I ran in and put on my wig and got in my costume, ran out and did my number and came off, and at the end of the show, Cecil Beaton came back furious, and he said, "Not that way, you silly girl, this way."
And turned your hair around?
Just, yeah, like
You should have
Rabbi
done the same
Cavett.
thing to
Yes,
him.
Yes.
Yes. I think he does, doesn't he? I'm not sure.
He forgave me later, but
Yeah.
it was...
What's funny, I'm surprised with all the excitement of that night that you don't remember my coming. I was just a student, and people were thronging backstage, and I thought, I'm going to see where they're going.
I don't
And I went
remember
backstage
any
and-
one particular student. You know, there were many, of course.
Yeah. Well, it's probably because I didn't either say anything to you or make myself known in any
I
way. just
probably
sort of-
was still in a stupor.
I stepped into the dressing room and stepped out. You were wearing some sort of plaid pants.
Was I?
Yeah?
How fascinating.
Yeah, no, you really were. They were, I'll never forget them. They were trousers, I mean.
I'll give them to you if you like.
Well, stand up, let's see. Well, I don't think we need to. That's all, I've always wanted those pants. No, I'm not even sure. Yeah, it was the first night, sure. Do you remember a pair of sort of red plaid?
The pants I remember.
Trousers that you had-
Unfortunately, I wish I could say I remembered you, but isn't that awful?
Maybe if I want to know what kind of a kid you were.
Well,
Where you were a child star at what age? 12, 14, something like that? Very
yeah,
early.
About 12,
Yeah.
professionally, yeah. But my parents, my stepfather, I should say, was a singer. And when I was about 7 or 8, really to keep me occupied because my school was evacuated because of the war and things like that, he decided that just to keep me busy, he would give me some singing lessons. And I don't know whether he had heard me singing or anything like that. I never thought I could sing, but he started teaching me and found that I had a voice, and it was a kind of freak voice.
How do you mean that?
Well, it had an incredibly large range. It was very thin and quite squeaky, but terribly long and very powerful. And I could do incredible acrobatics with it. I mean, all sorts of coloratura songs. And it sounded a bit like a juvenile Ema Sumac or something like that,
The lady who sang 4 octaves?
That's right, yes.
You have a great range.
No, I had 4 octaves. I don't anymore.
You've lost octaves?
Yes.
At what age do octaves start falling away?
Well, depends if you're a boy or a girl. Mine kind of started to crash about my ears when I was about 17. And I guess that what happened was that instead of being a long, thin voice, my voice began to mature and kind of, shorten.
You lost notes at both ends or at one end?
Yes, and the whole gimmick by the time I was 17 was that I was this fantastically incredible high singer. And when I started to lose them, I thought that, I might as well take my life. There was nothing else left.
Really? You were that sad about it?
Well, no, that worried, because I was committed to shows and I was expected to sing, and when you suddenly can't, I was kind of worried. But
you said your stepfather, did you not live with your real parents?
no, my real parents were divorced. I lived with my mother and her second husband, that was my stepfather.
Oh, I see.
And my dad also remarried, and they both had separate children. And
So you have a lot of half-brothers and sisters.
yes, that's right, yeah.
Well, was it rough for you as a kid being thrown into the theater, which is a wicked world that's supposed to warp you and turn you into it?
No, it was kind of fun. Looking back on it, I suppose there were rough times, but you never think at the time that they're rough. I mean, I was allowed all sorts of privileges that other kids were not, and I was allowed to go into the theater, and I was allowed to watch from the side of the stage and get involved in it all, and I felt I was the luckiest girl in the world. I guess I did miss out on a few things. I didn't have that many chums of my own age and things like that, and I didn't have much schooling. And
You didn't?
no, I had a kind of spasmodic schooling until I was about 12, when I did start working professionally, and then I had a governess who, God bless her, tutored me and taught me anything I might know.
Did anybody warn you as you were going into the theater that there's people who will say, "You want to sit on my lap, little girl?" And
well, I had
like
a few
that?
awful letters from one or two people who thought it might be fun to write like that, but no, people said that people in the theater were terrible and evil, and I ought to watch out, and I never found a soul that was really mean to me. And I guess, people never hurt puppies, and I guess when I was really young, they never thought to hurt me either.
Yeah. Have you met any lousy people since
Oh,
then?
well,
or?
of course, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. We can get to some of those later,
Yes.
when Blake gets out.
In the next
yeah.
commercial, yeah.
Okay. I wonder, I asked you about your image earlier. I hope that doesn't bother you, because I don't see anything wrong with your image, or I'm not even sure you have that one, because you have played a kind of variety of roles.
Well, I think I
but
do
if
have
you-
an image. It'd be silly not to admit that people think in a certain way about me. I'm not completely
Well,
sure
they wouldn't
what that
cast
is.
you as Geronimo.
No.
But-
No. Well, go on.
Do you want to let loose a string of profanity here to?
No, I did that in the dressing room before I came on.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you decide to write a book all of a sudden?
I see where you're leading. It had to do with a string of profanity, in actual fact.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
It's a long story. I'll be as brief as I can. My stepdaughter, Blake's daughter, Jennifer, was 11 years old, and all of us, that's Blake's 2 children, my daughter, secretaries, and Blake's associate producer and his wife, and a nanny, and all sorts of other people, were all on location in France and Belgium and Ireland for the film Darling Lily that we were all making. And the children just kind of went berserk. There was no one really to keep an eye on them, and they never brushed their teeth, and they never put on clean clothes, and they really just ran wild. And I finally said, this has got to stop, being very officious and in my proper Mary Poppins manner. And so I dreamt up I said, let's make a game out of it. Come on, whoever doesn't brush their teeth 3 times, who fails to brush their teeth 3 times, or who doesn't at least pick up clothes and put them in the laundry basket to save us all the trouble, will have to pay a forfeit. And Jenny, my stepdaughter, said, okay, but you play too. And I said, all right, well, what should I do? And she said, don't swear so much. And I didn't realize that I had been swearing talking of profanities, and so I said, okay, and lost my part of the game within the first half hour we started to play it. And so...
I bet you can make a stagehand blush when you want.
No, I don't think so. But anyway, I said, well, okay, what's my forfeit to be?
Yeah.
And she said, well, okay, write me a story. And so I said, fine. And I was going to write just a short thing and get it over and done with and try to make amends. But then I thought, no, I'll try and write something that may turn out to be just a little constructive, that might teach us something, that might make something of this summer that it's not. And so I decided to try and write a story about a little girl who lived in the country, because Jenny's a girl who lives mostly in the town. And that's how it came about. And then I just couldn't stop writing.
I have a copy. It's called Mandy, and it says Julie Edwards. So you're not capitalizing on your well-known name, which is interesting. It's a nice book for kids.
Thank you.
Yeah, but and you actually wrote it. It's not.
I
something
really
that
did. No, it took me 2
often
years to do it, believe it or not. And because I didn't, do it all at once. I did it when I could. And every time Jenny doesn't live with us all the time. She lives with her mother in London. And every vacation that she came to spend with us, she'd say, "Is it done yet? Is it ready?" And I finally really had to finish it.
Yeah. Talking with Julie Andrews. Say, suppose that someone came to you with a role in a new movie, and the great scene was done mother naked, as they used to say in Nebraska, where I come from. Have you thought about how you would handle that? Or would you?
Well, I think, first of all, I think about how my husband might handle it. And
Yeah.
then I'd figure if the producers could handle it, I could.
Oh, you'd check with Mr. Edwards first?
Oh, yes.
With the Mr.?
Yes.
You would?
Yeah.
How would you say it? Suppose I'm your husband.
Oh, gosh. Well, I call him Blackie. It's my nickname for him. And I guess I'd say, well, first of all, I'd find out what kind of a mood he was in.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, oh, God, what would I say?
Well, here's how you...
Blackie, guess what?
Yeah.
Here's a fine thing.
Okay, I'll be him.
Some idiot.
Yes, yes. What is it? Julie, my darling. Is that how he talks to you?
Not exactly, no.
Oh.
I'd say some idiot.
What is it now, sweets?
Oh, you better ask him when he comes out. and
Maybe
see.
we should.
Yeah.
But you could just say, well, you do it like this. You just go up to him and say, Blake, or Blackie.
Blackie.
What about my taking off my clothes? In the movies. Take a pause there.
I don't think I'd be, well,
And
okay.
maybe he'd lure him in like that. And then he'll be caught off guard. Now, of course, do you want to do it or not? That's the thing. Suppose the scene's really good, and the movie's really good, and you really want to do it.
Oh, my God.
In other
Should
words,
I or
well, you've
shouldn't I?
answered me in a way, because in other words, you have not made up your mind flatly that you wouldn't do a scene in the buff then.
No, I don't think
Not
so.
at all.
Yeah, also,
Yeah.
God, there are so many ifs. If it was
Oh,
one of
sure.
Blake's movies, it would be smashing.
Yeah,
And why not, really?
yeah. But there are actors who flatly won't. I don't quite understand that, because I certainly don't think nudity in the movies is
I
immoral.
tell you, honestly, the simple reason is if the scene really honestly called for it and it was worthy of the film and the film was good, I don't see why one shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it was just thrown in for
Box office.
Yeah, I mean, come and see Mary Poppins naked or something like that.
Yes.
I mean, that'd be silly, wouldn't it?
Transparent parasol and
Yeah.
the whole thing. Yeah, it is fair.
That's right.
Yeah, that was probably the way
Carpet
they
bag
would,
with nothing but a powder puff in it, right?
they would exploit it
Yes.
a bit, I suppose. Yeah. But it isn't a flat out no. Well, when he comes out here,
I
he'll be
hate
out
the way
here
you keep
certainly.
saying flat out no.
Well, flat out. No, well, isn't that an English expression? A flat out no?
Outright no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Or
let's change
is it the expression flat out no connected with nudity? That would upset Carol Burnett.
It would upset me, yeah.
But, sorry about that. But I often wonder, you were a kid star and a kid performer, and I always wonder if kid performers wonder if they missed out on a whole life that other kids could have had because they were in a dark and damp theater. Well, do you want your own kids to go into it if one of them wants to go on the stage?
Well, if one of them wants to, Jenny seems to want to very much, and I don't think there's anything we could do to stop her. And if she really wants to, then I guess the best way is to help her do it as nicely as possible and enjoy it as much as possible and know why she's in it,
Yeah.
I don't think it's that awful, dark, terrible thing. It can be tremendous fun,
Mm-hmm.
and a good learning experience. I mean, one may not be the best student in the world, but you can pick up so many nice things. And for instance, you always get to learn something. Like when I did Sound of Music, I had to learn to be able to play the guitar a little bit, and things like that. You always try one step more than you think you can do, and that's good.
And in Hawaii, you had to learn to have a baby.
Yeah, I'd had some experience before, yeah.
That's true. Let's take, you know, we have a clip from Hawaii, and it would be a good time to see it here. Tell us something about this scene, if you can.
Well, everything in Hawaii, as you know, was epic. It was either the storm at sea, or the measles epidemic, or the birth scene, or the storm, or, you know, hundreds of things, or the fire. And this was the last scene that I shot on the film, and I guess they saved it till last. I don't know why. Maybe because they didn't know if I could do it or not. But I was supposed to pretend to give birth to a baby, and I'd never done anything like it before, and I wasn't allowed to sing, you know, and I wondered what I was going to do. And they had a real doctor on the set to time my contractions, or acted contractions and so on, and he got terribly swept up in the scene, and after each take he would come and put his hand on my brow and take my pulse and ask me if I was all right and things like that. And
you convinced him?
Well, he seemed convinced, yes, and he got very worried about me, and I kind of think it dear that all I really gave birth to at the end of the whole day's hard work was a 15 feet of celluloid or whatever it was, you know.
But to get this out of the way right away, what are you sickest of in terms of people coming up and joking to you about, you know, the way they come up to magicians and say, "Can you make my mother-in-law disappear?" Do people come up and say, "Hey, Hannibal, would you?"
I bite them on the nose.
Bite, yeah.
And on the ear.
Just
and the heels.
definitely,
And they scalp it. They go across the street.
Is there
Sometimes they cross the street before I get to them.
Okay. People do realize it's you, though, do they? Even though you, sitting here now, do not look precisely like the demon you created on the screen.
No. It is funny, though, because I've done a few interviews the last few days, and people do think that I'm going to bite them. I don't think they're pretending, but they are a bit nervous, and they start laughing nervously.
I don't know if you could sense it, but I was at a thing last night where you walked out upon a stage briefly at some ceremonies before the screening of the movie. And when you entered, there was a sort of ooh around me, as well as the applause. Yeah. So for a time, you will know what Boris Karloff must have felt like.
Yes.
Only cliche I can think about you is the fact that you're an immense star who had an unhappy childhood, or do you want to correct me on that?
Well, I could correct you a little. I think it's a sort of misquote. I didn't have an unhappy childhood as such. I mean, my parents were loving parents. I was the only child who was a bit lonely, that's all. I had a lonely school career, and that's what it was, and I was, and it dogged me for years and years and years. And I don't regret 1 minute of it, because it was the rocket fuel that made me become an actor, to compensate for all that loneliness and lack of confidence and all that.
Yeah, I see how I misstated it now, because just about everything I've read about you has talked about the fact that at school you felt you couldn't learn anything. You either would or couldn't learn mathematics. You felt you didn't belong anywhere. You thought you were...
That's true. That is all
I think they
true.
convinced you were stupid.
Yes, they did.
And, but what saved you? You were a musician?
I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a pianist. I still play, you know. I'm not that good, but I mean, I don't play in front of people because I get embarrassed by it, so I just play in my own place. I play a lot of classics. And I wanted to be a concert pianist. Actually, I just wanted to be very famous because I wanted to meet Claire Bloom. That's all, because I fell in love with...
Specifically Claire Bloom?
Claire Bloom, because I saw her in the film Limelight with Charlie Chaplin. I thought, I've got to become famous. I've got to become successful, because then I'll meet her. So I thought I'd become a musician. I don't know why. I thought, well, if you get well known, you meet all these movie stars and actresses. Anyway, I became an actor 20 years later. I did actually work with her, and we played Man and Wife in The Doll's House on film.
Now, we're always told that when our dreams come true, they're a little disappointing. How did she disappoint you?
Oh, she didn't. Well, she was okay. She was very nervous at the time. And, yeah, she was fine.
Did you ever tell her that you were specifically, she was one of your dreams as a small boy?
No.
When I asked you about the music, I was thinking about that. As a kid, you could at least survive on the fact that you could play a bit and do what we call imitations of your teachers.
Oh, yes. Well, that was my defense, because I couldn't belong amongst my colleagues in school, you know, my contemporaries. The only bridge to kind of normal living was for me to mimic schoolmasters and impersonate these school teachers and anyone in authority. And then I developed it as time went by and became quite astute at imitating movie stars and actors and politicians. And I also played the piano. I was a very lonesome, solitudinous child. I used to play the piano and improvise and look very sad and felt very sad. But all this was fodder for my future as an actor, I guess.
Yeah, if you can survive the childhood, it'll all be grist for the mill later on.
Yeah, well, most people say
for
that
actors.
Childhood is the most painful part of one's life, I think.
Yeah, and someone said anyone who thinks he really had a happy one is deluded, as they find out in their psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
It seems to me everybody in Wales is related. There only seem to be about 5 family names. Everyone's is either an Evans or a Richards or
That's
a...
right, Jones, Davis.
Yeah. So you and I might be. I had a Welsh grandfather.
Yeah.
Now, the part of Wales you came from, what accent would your headmaster have had?
Well, he was Welsh. He was a rugby player and played. Got his rugby cap, which means that he played international rugby for Wales. That was my last school. His name was Idwyl Rees. He spoke with a strong Welsh accent. He was a tyrant of a man. And
how would he greet a class or discipline? Could you give us some?
Said he used to shut up and stand up straight and quiet and all that.
And did he trill his R's?
Oh, I know. Actually, I've got a very close Welsh accent, although it's sort of modified.
Yeah.
I was born in the same town as Richard Burton. Richard had a much more cultivated voice than mine.
Do Burton for a second.
Burton, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
I would swear
I
he
saw him
was
in it.
sitting here.
But I've got a more, actually I've got a much more rapid delivery than Richard. I suppose because I've got a, maybe a much more, I don't know, maybe I've got a faster rhythm or something. But,
And did you get his autograph as a kid?
I did. I was 15 years of age and I went to his house in Caraddock Street. Caraddock, there's a Welsh name. Caraddock Street in Taibach, Port Talbot. Yeah. And knocked on the door, praying that he wouldn't answer it. And his sister came to the door and I said, it's Richard Burton. And she said, come in. She said, Richard, it's Dick Hopkins' boy, Dick Hopkins in the baker. So I went in and there was Richard shaving with an electric razor. He had a T-shirt on. And I'd never seen anyone with an electric razor. And his wife Sybil was sitting at the table reading the morning paper. He said, what do you want? I said, I have an autograph, please. He said, all right. Where are you from? I said, Commercial Road, Taibach. He said, I used to work in the co-op shop across there, in the shoe shop. He said, I was hopeless. So I immediately, there was a kindred spirit, because he was hopeless at his job and I was hopeless.
Burton was hopeless, there might be hope.
There was hope, yes.
Burton, what we were talking about earlier, on a show I did with him, I tremulously raised the subject of booze. And I said, would you talk about it? And as you know, he did, and he looked into the camera and delivered a very moving speech, really, about if it's your enemy as well as it is mine, I know what you're going through, and so on and so on. This was actually clipped out and used by AA and others because it was so well done. Now, you fall into the same category. You've had a period that's always written about excessive boozing and wildness, and if you think O'Toole and Burton were something, you should have seen Hopkins at his best or worst, and so on, and you've beaten it.
Yeah, I was pretty mild, really, compared to those two, those Hellraisers.
You declined the title, do you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I gave up the championship.
Yeah.
I was just a nuisance more than anything. I wasn't really a Hellraiser. I was just in a lot of trouble. I was just a nuisance. Yeah. And one day, some years ago now, I stopped. I thought, this is crazy. And I was very tired and fed up with myself, and I stopped.
Was it just an act of will? Did you have help?
I got some help for it, and and I realized that I wasn't alone with it, and that was the end of that. I'm glad to say, and I never thought it would be possible to live without it because it was my only sustenance, it was my only way of coping. Mm-hmm. And now I've got into the habit over the years of not drinking, and life is so much better.
My guess is that the Welsh have a higher rate of depression than other races. I haven't seen the statistics on it. We know the Scandinavians do.
Yeah.
And
it's a pretty gloomy land.
Yeah.
Wales. It's very isolated on a little peninsula. Mm-hmm. And they're very melancholy people. The Irish have got much more going for them because they're much more extrovert and crazier than the Welsh. The Welsh are rather repressed.
Yeah.
Good people, though. I don't have problems with being Welsh or non-Welsh or anything. But my Welsh colleagues will say, "What are you saying? You're a Welsh actor. You're not English." Yeah. I say, "Oh, forget it." So I say British now, just to hedge my bet.
If only England looked like it does in Howard's End all the time.
Now, isn't it beautiful?
I would have been happy to be in 1910 in England.
You enjoyed the film?
Very much. Isn't there a way in which it's a little easier for an actor to play an insane man than it is to play a terribly ordinary man who has dimensions to him that have to be seen? Like this man that you play is proper, he's repressed, he does not like the lower classes, he eventually collapses. It seems to me, in a way, it would be harder to play someone like that than to play a madman.
Well, because of one's vanity, you know, you always wanted to look good, you always want to be the sympathetic character. So playing Wilcox, you don't have much chance. But what I try to do is, I'm wearing that silly cap, you know, and looking like, whatever they call it. And, but it is difficult, but not as difficult as that. But it's much more fun playing the villains.
Is it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. To see what a son of a bitch you can be.
Yeah, he has much more dimension to it.
Yeah. Have you known any madmen? Other than those in our profession, I mean, the names that leap to mind right
yes,
away.
I
mean by that, have you ever been in the back ward of an old asylum? Or
no, but I've actually met a madman who's on the loose in London, and that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
And I had coffee with him one day. I realized how nuts he was. And he never blinked. So I based lecture on him. Never blinked. He kept asking me questions. Then before you could answer them, he'd ask you another one and another one. And in the end, it made you feel that you were in a different reality.
So at any given moment in talking with him, you didn't see the insanity?
No. He'd completely... it's like somebody I used to know, a woman who used to sort of kick you on the shins and then say, don't you have a sense of humor? And smile. That kind of madness. Mm-hmm. You know, they could change reality for you, but those people can really manipulate you. I think Kathy Bates in Misery is the most brilliant piece of mad acting I've ever seen. You know?
Really? Yeah, sure.
Because I knew this woman in America, she was exactly like Kathy Bates in this film. You never know what you're going to do. You say you don't know how to handle me, you don't know how to, you can't pay them a compliment, you may say, and they say, what do you mean by that? You know?
Yeah. Seeing that reminds me what a good-looking film this is. By that I mean, it's not only is England beautiful in it, but appropriately so. You know, there are movies where the camera works great, but it has nothing to do with the movie.
Yeah.
And everything is of a piece in this. It may be, I don't know, the movie that's as faithful to a book as it is possible to be.
It's almost uncompromising in its faithfulness.
The book has, many fans, and we'll have more now, of course.
Yes. You think it'll be a hit here in America? Because Room with a View was.
Well, if it isn't, then it's one of several signs of our decline. But I should think it would. I mean, I can't imagine what people would find wrong with it. You know the feeling when you see a film, first time I had in my life was The Third Man. Yes. And I went out of it thinking, I have been totally entertained, there's nothing wrong with that film, and I am satisfied.
Yes.
And that's how I felt last night.
Part of where we filmed that in England, down in Surrey and Sussex, that is still ancient. You still get the ancient trees and the old woods down there. It's very untouched, all those bluebell scenes. That's all ancient English. That goes back 1,000 years. All the Normans trampled around there and the Romans were there. So it's still very ancient, very haunted.
And Henry Wilcox, your character, is really... I wonder if we have Henry Wilcoxes in America today. I suppose they're investment bankers in Wall Street.
Aren't they?
What?
They're usually presidents.
Yes, they're often presidents.
Presidents of governments.
I wonder whether our current politics baffling to people outside America these days. They've gotten so bizarre.
Yeah, they're pretty baffling. Our politicians are pretty baffling too. Nobody seems to know what the hell is going on. Yeah. Nobody can sort out the muddle and the mess. Everyone's got a problem. It'd be great to actually hear a politician say, I don't know. They never say, I don't know.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, they never say, sorry, I don't know.
We had one who did.
Jimmy Carter?
No, Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, yeah.
You have to reach back a ways.
Yeah.
But at some point he said, if I had all the wisdom of the world, I wouldn't know what to do about slavery.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's the last time on record, perhaps, that any president said anything, or even said, let me think about that question a while and come back, rather than reel off some glib answer.
Yeah.
Now, from Howard's End, what next? Dracula?
Dracula, I've done that, yes, with Francis Ford Coppola.
That's in the can, as we say?
That's all in the can. A month ago today we finished, in fact. He's an extraordinary director.
People would assume, of course, that you're playing the Count, but you're playing Van Helsing, I think.
I'm Van Helsing in this one, the crazy Van Helsing. Don't get to bite anyone on this one. Yeah. Coppola's a terrific director to work with, and Winona Ryder, and Keanu Reeves, Gary Oldman. It was a long shoot. It was many, many long days, hours. I mean, sometimes I go to sleep in the dressing room and somebody comes in and says, "Can we have you on set now?" I said, "What time is it?" 11:45. I said, "Midnight." And so we go on set. And there's Francis walking around there, you know, in control of everything, tireless. We were all dropping. I've got a lot of energy, but...
It seems like movie making is designed to get everybody else perfect while the actors are worn out by the time they're ready to shoot.
I always take I read a lot of books. But you know, it's a funny thing working with Coppola. I realize how much a director's medium it is for me. I mean, the actors get a look in, but I mean, he's the boss, he's the governor, and it makes life easier because then you don't have to take much responsibility. You go in and Francis directs you like a traffic cop, and he comes up with some amazing scenes, and at the end of the day you think, well, that's great, you know. I used to go in every morning not sure what was going to happen, and at the end of the day I thought, what happened? That was an incredible day's work.
Somebody knew what he was doing.
He did, yeah.
What do you do when you're stuck in a film where you realize the director's a klutz after you've already filmed a while? Well, in your earlier days, you were said to walk out of those films.
Oh, yes, I've walked out of a few in recent days, but it's difficult. You know, there's no good pretending, you know, that you're going to enjoy it if you've got a bad director or a sadistic director. Oh, no. That's something I'll never actually get over. But I always fight back in those situations. But once you've done that, it's a dead end anyway. You can never get back onto the track again. Because once there's anger and rage on set, you've had it, I think.
You might as well leave. It would probably
May
be
as well
better for
leave.
the film.
But there are some people who actually have to thrive on that, you know.
Yes. The tougher it is, the more...
they believe that it's more creative. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a load of rubbish. It's a crock of rubbish, really.
Here you were, that small boy in Wales, never knowing that you'd be starring in Howard's End and other films, meeting Chaplin, meeting all the people you dreamed about. You've worked with everybody would envy, it seems like.
Yeah.
Could you have done without the knowledge that Laurence Olivier and Danny Kaye may have had a homoerotic relationship over 10 years?
Well, I don't believe it. They were both great artists, both of them.
It's a recent book is just out, and this is the hot item in it.
It's all such rubbish. I mean, maybe they did. I mean, that's up to them. But they were both, I mean, great artists, supreme artists, and it doesn't matter. I don't really care. I mean, who gives a damn about all that? The poor guy's dead now. They're both dead. Why don't they let them rest? You know, I'd rake up all that stuff.
Do you know either of them well enough to know what this rumor would have done to them if it had surfaced during their lifetime? Would they?
I think it would have driven Olivier mad. Now, he was a depressive. He was a very troubled man. He always looked like sort of the Rock of Gibraltar, but he was a very troubled man. He got very hurt with criticism, and he suffered a lot in his life. He was a very oversensitive man. I think it would have killed him, actually, to find out that.
Really?
Yeah, I don't believe it anyway.
Yeah. He went through that 10-year period of stage fright and all kinds of horrors.
He used to have people standing in the wings so he could watch them. So he always wanted to run off stage.
So he wouldn't feel alone on stage.
Yeah, and people sometimes would go on stage with him and just stand there, and they'd leave him because he was terrified of losing his lines. He said to me once, we were drinking together, I was going over his lines, he was doing a long day's journey tonight, and he said to me, he sat up, he'd been drinking a lot of whiskey, and he said, do you know, he said, if I'd never been an actor, he said, I would have probably either become a killer or have ended up in the asylum.
That's what we were talking about earlier, isn't it?
Yeah, and then he later on again, he said, what's the next line? He's a chronic depressive.
Yeah.
A great man, a great actor.
I wish I had a collection of things that great actors envy about other actors. I remember Richardson saying once, I don't have Larry's fine fury.
I don't have it at all.
Oh, that's good. Will you teach me to do that
I don't
afterwards?
have his fine fury. He has the charm of 12 people. My goodness. I always remember he said,
I'm jealous of you.
oh, he's got the charm of 12. Gielgud said, of course, I mean, he's so vulgar, isn't he, Laurence? I mean, so vulgar. Wonderful actor, but so common, so terribly vulgar. Could never resist having a go of it.
Oh, Lord.
No one was sacred in Gielgud's presence.
I didn't know Goofy was dead.
Oh, he's not. We don't want to alarm anybody. That was just the end of that. How are you?
Left. I'm very well, thank you.
Gee, you look terrific. You always look terrific. Does anything ever go wrong with you? Don't you ever get hurt? You take tremendous beatings. You bounce back.
I'm always getting hurt. I had, we finished shooting last Wednesday, which I had limped through the last 2 weeks because 3 weeks before that I had to gallop a mule.
Wait a minute. One doesn't gallop a mule, does
no,
one?
one doesn't gallop a mule, but the scriptwriter thought you did, and so he had me riding in to finish off the heavies across the field on a mule. And I spent about an hour. You know, this is bareback, and it's got a razorback thing on it, this horse.
The
this
mule.
mule.
The mule.
This mule, and
You mean
really
it's-
just
it's-
ears to grab hold of.
Its
And I'm
own
trying-
back
yeah.
is rough.
Oh, terribly rough.
Very hard on.
I was speaking falsetto after half an hour.
Never mind that.
Anyway, I really got the thing going like this, and we came into the shop where I'm supposed to hit the fellow with my right hand and wheel the horse around, the mule, which it didn't. It just bucked me straight in the air. I'm no cowboy. And I went flying, and I landed on my back. That was the end of shooting for the day. And
Except
I now
for
have
shooting the mule,
the
probably.
fourth and fifth vertebrae have gone
Permanently?
on the mule.
No, wait a minute.
No,
you-
I'm all right now.
But
I'm
your
all
back, you pulled your back.
right. Yeah, my back's okay now. It's just my eyes that are bad.
But was there a great shout when you fell off?
Yeah, hooray, everybody was happy. Yeah.
No, I didn't mean that. I meant being a valuable property. Did they all run to your aid and fan your brow? And
Well, Tony threw me a cigarette, and that was it, you know.
Tony Citrus. Curtis.
Cut it.
Yes.
Spelled back,
always-
Citruck.
Spelled sideways, it's Citrus.
Spelled
always-
backwards, Enoch Citruck.
Do you do things backwards too?
Yeah, I'm Erum Rigor.
That's right. Wait a minute. Erum Rigor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great name, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm Russian.
Or Room E, Gorer.
Yeah. Do you know this is much nicer than the last time because I was on your show in London.
That's right. Didn't you like that?
Well, I had a feeling I was never coming on.
Why?
Well, you had Jonathan Miller and Enoch Parr.
Oh, you were there in the Powell night. That's right. That was
And
my.
they kept talking. Well, I thought I'm never going on, so I was having a little at the back. And you called me on. I really couldn't walk across that stage.
You did a wonderful job for a man who was on his knees. I thought hardly anybody guessed that you were not just a sort of
Well, I made you look tall, Rick.
semi-graceful,
You
very
must-
short man. You were soused.
Slightly.
I didn't know the English drank. I thought it was the Irish. who
Well,
did
we
that.
usually wait till the sun goes down. Mm-hmm. The sun's been down quite a long time now.
You ever go to the North Pole, you'll be soused for 6 months.
The midnight sun. I've been there. I did a tour of the land of the midnight sun. We started off in a jet to Stockholm. Then we got into a Cessna, and we landed somewhere. And then we got into a helicopter, and we were flying. And I said, you know, it's interesting because the traffic drives the same side as England. And I said, they're on the wrong side. And the pilot said, oh, no, we're over Finland. We're not allowed to fly over the Swedish defenses. And so there we are in red no man's land. And then we landed on a football pitch at midnight. It was bright sunlight. Quite extraordinary.
That would be strange. I was in Sweden and I could not get used to the light of being so.
Well,
it's a strange thing that people can come home from work and go sailing after dinner
Oh,
in
yes.
broad daylight.
Well, they all paint their houses at midnight.
Yeah.
There was, we had to go from one place where we couldn't go by helicopter, and they had delivered me a Volvo, which was the car I drove in the Saint. Mm-hmm. And they said, the police said you can take that road, which is a defense road, where normally people are not allowed to drive along. And I'm doing about, I suppose, 90 miles an hour. I'm in a hurry to go, and it's a straight road, but gravel. And I saw a man on a bicycle in front of me, so I started blasting the horn. I had Miss Sweden on my right, and my stunt director behind me, who's saying, slow down, the bicyclist is not going to move. And so I just thought, well, at the last minute, I'll change down. And blasting the horn, and I started to change down when I had about 20 yards to go, and it was a reindeer. Looked like a man on a bicycle, you know, with the things, but just walking steadily down the middle of the road.
What had you had to drink that time?
Aquavit, a little Aquavit is very nice. Follow up
I've
with
seen a
little-
reindeer from every possible angle, and it doesn't resemble a man at all, Roger.
Oh, it does. What have you not been drinking?
Well, you seem perfect.
Are you proposing or something?
No, nothing like that. You just seem perfect. I mean, I don't know you're what every young man, when he gets in front of the mirror and tries to get ready to go out for a date, probably as a kid, wishes he looked like.
Well, I always wanted to look like Veronica Lake, actually.
Really? Well, you're not far off. No, I mean, don't you have a hole in your
I
T-shirt
do,
or
yeah,
anything? Isn't there anything?
A hole in my T-shirt, you must
Yeah.
be joking. I don't wear a T-shirt.
Oh,
I just wear skin next to my chest.
well, see, you're perfect. But I mean, there is a problem in that. You realize that you do fit the sort of the, I don't want to say stereotype, because that makes you seem less of an individual. I mean, you have all the attributes of someone who they look for to be what you are in your profession. This, of course, consequently, causes a great number of women to be attracted to you all over the place, which, as everyone knows, can become
All
extremely...
over which place?
The entire globe, which means that this can become tiresome and present problems to you as these ladies lie in waiting for you outside your hotel room door and other places too numerous to mention.
Is this a monologue?
I'm trying to get to the question, and I
It's
can't
not
think...
reading it either. It's not.
How do you handle all these women?
My wife looks after it for me. She's Italian.
Your wife's Italian?
Yeah.
Then you have no problem at all.
I have no problem whatsoever.
It was hardly worth that long question, was it? Do you have any problems because of the show, The Saint? Did you ever... It's silly to say, did any saints ever complain? But you know what I mean.
No, nearly.
Nearly?
Nearly. My daughter started convent school a couple of years, or 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, as I mentioned before, I used to drive. Now I drive an Aston Martin, so it's all right, so I can mention Volvo. But what are you sniggering for? And I, on early days, could go to the school and pick her up. And the big girls' class was by the gates of the school. And the 16-year-olds and one of the daughters took shorthand of one of the writers in the studio who was in the big girls' class. It was a long way of getting around to it. But anyway, the Mother Superior was taking the class that particular afternoon when I drove in. And all the girls are trying to look out of the window, because an actor's coming in and they recognize the car. And she said, although Mr. Moore in person may have a more pleasing aspect than that which he portrays on the cinematographic screen, he is not a saint. And until His Holiness, in all his wisdom in Rome, sees fit to canonize him, he will remain seated while he comes into the school. I took my daughter out of that school, I don't know.
You want her talking like that? That's a lovely sentence.
Yeah, it's a
You didn't
hell
feel...
of a sentence to remember.
Yeah, you didn't feel put down by that at all.
No, because the next sort of end of term day, I signed autographs for the nuns.
Yeah.
Which surprised me, I never thought it was awful. I was at Warner Brothers doing Maverick or the Alaskans. And we had some visitors on the set one day, and I was standing with my back to everybody behind by the side of camera, delivering offstage lines. And I goofed a line, which I normally do. And I was so angry, having goofed it to the actor I was feeding with the line, that I let out 2 short blasphemous words.
Blasphemous words.
Yes, which I won't repeat now. And then I turned, and to my horror, I saw these nuns. There were 24 of them. And so afterwards, I was taken over and introduced them, and I apologized. I said, you must forgive me for my language. I'm terribly sorry. And they said, it's all right, my son. We're sorry for you. And afterwards, I played the saint. It's marvelous, isn't it?
Were you raised as a Catholic?
No.
Oh.
No, I'm a Protestant.
How old were you during the war? Can you remember it?
I was either 11 or 12 when it started, and I was in the army when it finished.
Oh, then you clearly...
I remember it all right.
Were you bombed during the war?
Were we ever?
It seems that rings a bell. I think I asked Hermione Gingold that once. She said, I was bombed during most of the war. But can you remember close shaves?
We had bombs. We spent all the blitzes living in an Anderson shelter in the garden. It was called an Anderson shelter after the man who designed it, which was sort of 2 nasty pieces of corrugated iron like that with a hole in and covered up with earth. And my mother, father, and I and our dog used to get in it. It was awful.
How deep down was it?
Oh, it was only sort of covered by about 3 feet of earth. If you got a direct hit, you'd had it.
Yeah.
But incendiary bombs could drop on it, and you wouldn't feel anything. Just get a little warm, that's all.
Yeah.
Well, it must have been terrifying with those V2 bombs, those buzz bombs.
Yeah, did you see those V2s go over?
Oh, yes. When the buzz bombs were going, I was working as a cartoonist then, an animated cartoonist, in Wardour Street, And we used to have what we called bomb spotters. And it was always somebody's turn on the road to get up on the roof and say, blow a whistle if the bomb is coming. And I saw one coming, and I got so frightened I dropped the whistle. We lost 45 people that day.
A bit of black humor there. But did those things go over so that you could see them go?
Oh, yes.
It's funny, I was just thinking, I had Werner von Braun here one night in that same chair who designed them. Which
I
is
wish I'd had him here tonight. I have a few words to say to him.
But I picture from a movie I saw. Could you see them go traveling?
Oh,
Did they
yes.
travel at a speed you could watch them, or was it shoom?
Oh no, they move very slowly. These were the V1s. The V2s were the rockets that just sort of went boom, and you heard it coming after it arrived.
Why wasn't it easy to shoot them down if they traveled slowly?
Oh, they used to shoot them down. They used to shoot some of them down.
But enough got through.
But they used to sneak through. They were nasty. It was a lousy way of fighting a war.
Half the size of an airplane, Dick, too. They weren't that huge, you know. And then they had this great pipe out the back that was the jet, actually.
Were you there?
No, but I saw a lot of films on that. No, it was a terrifying thing, I can imagine, because the motor would cut out, see.
You'd
And
hear
then they'd
that
just
thing.
drop anywhere. They wouldn't.
Oh, once the motor stopped, then you didn't know where
that's
it
it.
were far.
You'd hear, you know, and then.
That was 2 miles away.
Yeah. And you weren't scared as a kid?
No,
Did it seem anything?
I
Did it
don't
seem
think you do
exciting
get
or in
it.
any sense fun? I know that sounds silly, but
No, it was a sense of adventure. You didn't have any gas or any water or electricity. You know, you'd have things like that. It was like camping out. But you don't have a fear. When you're living amongst it, it seems a normal way of life, which is ridiculous.
yeah.
But it's going on today, you know. This is the awful thing. The whole world is full of it.
But I can't imagine what it would be like to have been a kid during it. I used to see the movies, and I used to think, I wonder what it would be like if, I used to think, will they ever bomb this place? And
I hope not.
it seemed strange as a kid to.
We came
see that.
close. Very close.
What used to get me were stories of people in California who saw planes shot down, but it wouldn't appear in the paper. You know, they would see it, or a Japanese plane would get in close.
Really? They used to get
There are
that?
a few of those, yeah. And a friend of mine had a submarine near Santa Barbara. A submarine came in one night and shelled
Coast Guard
oil
station,
tanks.
yeah.
And it was never reported.
But those
until
planes
then.
had to be kamikaze because they couldn't obviously get from those days from Japan to America and do the return trip.
They might have taken off from the, I don't know where. Let me look into it. I know the.
I got lost on Monday night. I can do what?
Oh,
That's all, really.
on Monday night, you can have the rest of the evening to yourself.
Uh-huh.
What do you usually do on Monday night?
I usually watch football. Well, what do you do?
Not all year. I like football. I've been known to watch a football game.
I don't think I ever made it past 11 o'clock in my life.
A pass at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm usually asleep by then.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, tying everything together with football. I remember when you won that Oscar. I remember you getting up on the stage, and by the time you get to the actual winning of it, are you sort of numb from the? Were you glad you won it after all those years of making those films? Were you?
Oh, yeah, it's of course. You know.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I think it's the other people that are potential recipients of it that are numb because everybody, has been giving X-ray thoughts and kiboshes on the other people as they get closer until eventually, your name isn't called, and then I don't know what that feeling is, but I'm afraid I'm going to experience it again pretty soon.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, not being called.
Oh, not being.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
I wonder if it hadn't been your name, do you think you might have started to rise in your seat anyway? There have been cases of that, I'm told, at the Oscar ceremonies where people have thought they heard their name and gotten up and then had to pretend that they were trying to do something else, spot a friend across the room or something.
No, Rod Steiger was sitting behind me because he was nominated that same year, and he's since won one, as you all know.
Yeah.
So I can tell the story because I saw him, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he just looked at me. I said, "Well, if I see you heading down there, buddy, you're going to have to get over me." And fortunately, we didn't have to prove that test.
Yeah. You're bigger than Rod Steiger.
No, not really.
No, actually, he's bigger than you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew I would get that sifted out if we kept at it for a while. Why were you not appreciated before 1966?
I thought I was.
Well, I liked you, and all my friends did. But, yeah, I remember you in those really intense kind of some semi-psychotic roles that you would play. But then suddenly everything changed in 1966, and all the people who'd been saying, what had they been saying by that time?
Well, I wasn't really aware because I got a clipping service once for $15 a copy, whatever that is, you know, for a newspaper ad, or not ad, but a statement, and so they'd send out statements, and about 800 papers would carry it. So they'd send me the 800 copies, and it was $15 a shot. So I never read my reviews after that. You know.
That's a service that will clip anything
Yeah.
said about you all over the country.
Right, but they charge you by each little clip, and so it just got too expensive with my lack of income, so I didn't bother to read anymore.
You mean if 500 papers say the same thing about you, they send you 500 copies and charge you for 500 of them?
Right.
It's a wonderful business.
It was, until I found out that's not the way it works, but I'd already paid the bill, so that, you know, I don't know. It's not really important.
Is there any way you can give anybody a formula or a secret to playing a bad guy on the screen?
Well, I don't think there's a secret to it. I simply know that I just do what I'd hate to have somebody do to me. You know, that's pretty generally what offends you, and I think that most heavies are offensive, or should be, or else they're not doing their job. So, what wouldn't I want somebody to do to me? That's what I do to the other guy.
On the screen?
Yeah, right. For the approach.
That's interesting. So you think about the kinds of things that have bugged you the most about people, or things that where a man's behavior has offended you, and you use that.
Yeah.
So you're actually using other people's faults, not your own.
I mean, I wouldn't dare expose my fault, would I?
I don't know. What is your fault?
Well, I'm glad you got the singular. I don't know what it is. I'm still looking for it.
Yeah. That would be a nice feeling. What would be examples of offensive conduct on the part of other people that you've used in a role?
Well, I couldn't recall offhand because I think that they're probably so minute. You know, as a guy goes to put the cigarette out in an ashtray or something, just move it. You know, then he's got to come up. You know.
Wait a minute. A guy goes to put a cigarette out.
Yeah.
You move the ashtray
Right.
so that he can't reach it.
Well, no, you can reach it, but it's just that he's already. And you just go. Well, like if you were reading that, looking for your next commercial, and I went like that. I mean, and boom.
That would be an annoying thing.
Yes, I think it would.
And the next time I played a rat, I would use you as my inspiration.
No, I don't think you'd play a rat.
Oh, really, Mr. Marvin?
That's right.
Yeah. You don't think I could play a rat? Is that?
I didn't say you couldn't. I said I don't think you would. I think you're far too, a part of all of it, the good parts included.
Yeah.
And to be a rat, that excludes all the good parts.
So that you and I are very different.
Well, for your sake, hopefully.
I've always sort of thought of myself as a Lee Marvin type, and that I actually
not 24 hours a day.
I don't know what that would entail. That leads me to something, though. If this is what you mean by that, do you get this thing all the time that we talked about this once a little bit, but that Bogart always got because he was known as a tough guy on the screen, and in a bar, guys would, to impress their dates, say, "Watch this," and "Hey, Marvin, are you tough on the screen? Are you tough here?" Do you get that?
No, I've never had that, really. I've never had a problem, being chosen because of that. I don't think I project that in person. And I guess if I go into a bar where, that type of thing is going on, then I just watch my step and don't give them any provocation for it. See, because I'll tell you how that works. Actually, in most of my films when I was the heavy or a rat or whatever you want to call it, I didn't win the girl.
Right.
So, bang, they nailed me in the end, right? I got shot running down an alley. But I think the actors that have that problem, such as the Bogart image, etc., what happened is that they always ended up with the girl.
Uh-huh.
So that's why the provocation of offstage, the guy says, "Hey, you're pretty tough, huh? Let's see it."
But they don't envy you because you didn't win the girl.
That's
so
right,
many
I'm
times.
the loser.
Yeah. Gee, I hope that doesn't hold true in life for you.
Well, I don't think I can talk about that here, can I?
I'd be interested in hearing about it.
I'm sure a lot of people would be. I mean,
Oh, I'm talking with Lee Marvin. We were going to examine the most...
so,
I mean, the thought of discussing your romantic life didn't keep you awake? That's amazing. You gave a very candid... I'm sorry, I didn't give you a chance to answer there. It's good. You gave a very candid interview one time in Playboy magazine when you talked a great deal about yourself. I wonder, when you look back at a thing like that some years later, have your ideas changed? Are you ever sorry you said any of those things?
Oh, well, I think that you're sorry you say everything almost. Because I'm sure that, given a second time through or something, I could probably do it better. Because we'd learned by our experience, but I'm not going to waste time worrying about that either. I'm not going to say I said it and I'm glad. I say, is it true that you said it? I say, yeah. They say, how do you feel about that now? I said, well, we have to pursue it. And I said it then. I don't have to say it again.
So you don't like to repeat yourself? Do
I
you find
prefer not to.
interviewing generally kind of irritating, the fact that you do what you do up on the screen and to have to sit and talk for hours on end about yourself for a long interview is irritating?
No, it depends on the interviewer. I think that, I probably talk more about myself when I'm not being interviewed. But in
That's
order
interesting.
to maintain that semblance of the true modesty that I do on the screen, when I get interviewed, I become very modest. Oh, is that for, So
That's right. I never thought of that, but you do. When you're interviewed, you think, can't they please get off the subject of me? But then when other subjects are being talked about, one works the subject around to oneself.
Yeah.
I don't do that, but a lot of people do, I know. I'm glad to hear that you do it,
It's been my experience. That's been my experience working with other stars,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You talked in that article about being in the Marines, and you talked about a search for your masculinity. That was a phrase that came up in the article. I would think your masculinity would be quite easy to find from knowing you as I do.
We weren't going to talk about my private life now.
I won't be responsible for the kind of laughter I'm getting from the audience, but and I never am. But what is that about?
Oh, I don't know. I think that all kids go through it. And I was a child when I enlisted, And, my only history really was the motion pictures or what I'd seen as a kid in New York. So I wanted to go up to the, with the sword or whatever it was that, all the famous actors used to wear in those triple E pictures. The harems of women, and I hope, and, it's just, that's a very silly thing to even think about right now, I guess. Masculinity is what it is.
Yeah. Did you find that in the Marines there were a lot of guys who had gone in because they had some kind of hang-up like that? That's a favorite image of
No,
any
this was
tough-
during the war, and there was a very common effort, see, so the effort was the only thing then. I'm not aware of anything else but that at that time. Now, in peacetime or something, I imagine it's a wholly different discussion. But when we were going down on the train from New York, everybody was just, wanted to be John Wayne, which was exactly what it was all about then.
Yeah. What did they think of John Wayne movies? The guys who were actually in action, the way you were in the Marines during the war. What was your opinion of the war movies that you saw? Like
Well,
Sands
most of
War,
our training was almost doing them, because with a national effort like that, the motion picture companies kind of join in and say, yes, now we can utilize all those free extras out there, the Marine Corps or the Army and the Navy. So they make war films to get the war effort brought to the audience because there wasn't too much TV then, right? So that you were part of it in the training aspect. I mean, they'd say, well, they have a motion picture company coming in tomorrow, maybe a couple of phony actors in there, trying to get us to be, and then you'd be part of the scene. So
you were part of
yeah,
your duty was to be in war movies.
Almost in your training, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't make it far, though. I mean, I didn't get involved in any.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of guys that did.
But did the combat seem real to guys who actually knew what it was like in those movies with John Wayne and all?
Oh, well, combat's a very personal thing. I don't think two people will agree on anything in combat, so I think for the theatrical audience, they were doing the best they could at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wanted to see a newsreel, of, true death and destruction, so it's much better to do it theatrically, which is less painful.
Yeah. Do you ever have any? Last time you were here, you had just been in I can't remember if you had just been or were just about to be in The Dirty Dozen, and a lot of people thought that was a movie that glorified violence so that it shouldn't have been shown. Does that criticism irritate you ever?
No, I don't really consider that part of the film much of the film. I thought the whole film was basically the 12 guys and their training and the examination of them. Once we got into the actual effort of, making the jump into the palace or whatever it was, I mean, that's just, following out the footwork, I think, of why they were trained, why you could enjoy the front part of the film.
But you didn't think that the film was a bad influence on
what?
the people who get their kicks from seeing. Well, I'm mixing up two questions here. Do you think a movie can be a bad influence because it has people cheering, say, the gassing of Germans or the murdering of...
I'm sure it can be both ways. It can be a good influence, a bad influence, or an indifferent influence.
Yeah.
But that's not my job, or it wasn't my job at that time to ascertain whether this would be a great influence on not pouring gasoline on German generals. I wasn't really concerned about that. I was concerned about working with Jimmy Brown or Johnny Cassavetes or the rest of that marvelous group of actors.
Did you ever get hurt making a film?
Not really. I mean, not enough to where it would be where I could collect any unemployment on it.
Have you been emotionally hurt in the making of
Oh,
the
I'm
film?
struck every, right.
Could I ask you where you were wounded during the war?
Yes, I was shot in the ass.
Could...
That's unusual.
I hate a guest who won't be specific. I guess there's no way
I wish
to...
I could say something else, because I know that when I finally got home, I had written my mother saying that I'd been injured, so don't be disturbed by the telegram. And she wrote me back a letter and said that she had a dream. Roughly at the same time there, I was standing in the door of her bedroom, in the doorway, and I was in my dress blues and my head was bandaged. And I said, yes, she's my mother. How sweet of her, right?
Bandages were somewhat lower in reality.
Yeah, and I didn't have a set of blues. I mean, I was, right.
Gee. That's good.